This is Raw 12:51 a.m. and we're here with Jon Ronson discussing Psychopath Night, which you'll be the show that you're doing on the 14th of November at the Warwick Arts Centre. And so this is a talk discussing the events leading up to the writing and publication of the best-selling Psychopath test. And the website doesn't really give too much away about what you're going to be talking about for fear of spoiling all the twists and turns, but could you maybe tell us a little bit about what to expect?
Well, I've got two guests on the stage who are kind of amazing, and I don't want to tell you anything about them
Okay.
because it would be like M. Night Shyamalan giving
Oh,
away
of
the
course.
ending of his movies. But because honestly, if people in the audience they don't know like which way these stories are going, when the kind of revelations happen, the gasps are so loud and exciting for me on stage, and I don't want to kind of ruin that by giving away the twists. But it's a kind of funny, startling, poignant show about psychopaths and mental health labelling, and it's a really great show. Everybody who sees it loves it.
Okay, I'm very excited to see it. You were just saying about, mental health labelling and that, and you talk in your work a lot about the importance of not defining people by their maddest edges, as it were. And I was just wondering how, obviously in a lot of the work that you've written, especially I would say the films like Frank and I guess most recently Okja, you have very eccentric characters like Michael Fassbender's character and then maybe Jake Gyllenhaal's character. I was just wondering what it is that draws you to, I guess, researching and writing about individuals like this in this way.
Well, I mean, on a personal level, mental health has been like a big part of my life in some ways. I'm also really interested in, I guess, kind of demonizing people who are considered demons. I think that's probably something that's gone through my work for a number of years. I take people who kind of other people stigmatize and instead try and see the world through inside their heads and understand them and treat everybody as humans. So that's something that I did in my book about public shaming. That's something I do in the Psychopath test, and I think in Frank as well. That's going on.
Yeah.
Frank's a little bit different because it's about this kind of idiotic young kid who thinks being mentally ill is like really cool, and joins a band led by a man who wears a big fake head that he never takes off, and part of the sort of narrative of Frank is John's realization that actually being a sort of mentally ill artist isn't like awesome. It's kind of hard. Yeah. And I guess in Okja the similarity is, in the Psychopath test, I look at the kind of tyranny of some aspects of mental health labelling and how we love to declare other people insane, especially people we don't like. And in Okja, so I'm looking at the kind of tyranny of the kind of bad things that we do in Psychopath test, and the same in my book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And in Okja, I think it's similar because that's a movie about how to eat the meat. You have to ignore the slaughterhouse. Okja is a film about a giant magical pig that his best friend has to rescue before it's turned into meat. So I think there's sort of parallels with all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And speaking of So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I was just, again, I think that you do get that sense of there's this sort of, I suppose, dichotomy between people seeing themselves as very normal and seeing and wanting to sort of demonize other people, which I suppose is why we like labeling people as psychopaths, and sort of we have this fascination with the mentally ill. And I was just wondering, how much do you feel like you're writing about yourself and your own surroundings in that regard?
Yeah, I would. I mean, like as a writer, you you always are sort of working out your own stuff in your stories. So definitely, yeah. In So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I guess the reason why I wanted to write that, I mean, with everything that you do, there's always like a whole bunch of starting points and kind of origin stories. But in So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I had realised sort of like how I thought we should perceive our fellow humans, which is with kind of curiosity. I got to the point in my life where I sort of realised that curiosity was incredibly important.
Yeah.
And this sort of different thing coursed through social media. Instead of curiosity, it became a much more kind of instantly judgmental place. Now, of course, some people deserve instant judgment. Just look at what's happening with all the sex abuse stuff that's happening at the moment with Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein and so on. I'm not sort of advocating curiosity and compassion for everybody, no matter what their transgressions are. But I think the problem on social media is that people are, for the last few years, people have sort of found it hard to differentiate between what's a serious transgression and what's a not serious transgression. Somebody who makes a joke that comes out badly is sort of, labelled as a psychopath and destroyed and treated with the same level of punishment as, somebody who's done something really bad. So I think that's why I wanted to write that book. As I say, Psychopath now is, I talk about some of that stuff, but it's also this kind of really, I'm not saying psychopaths don't exist, because they do. I've met enough real psychopaths to know that they really do exist, that it's a real thing. But there's kind of complexities to mental health labelling, and if you get too drunk with your psychopath spotting powers, it can turn you a little bit psychopathic. So that's sort of what the show is about, in a way. But it's my journey about becoming drunk with my psychopath spotting skills. Yeah.
I think you made a good point. I mean, speaking of obviously immediate judgment of people who may not necessarily deserve it, to what level, I guess, do you think that we should be extending empathy towards people who we immediately assume are guilty, whether it's something like putting out a tweet that's read as racist, even if it's a ill-timed joke, or perhaps something a lot more serious? Where do we draw the line?
Well, I think intention's got a lot to do with it. I noticed actually when my book came out, I saw some people tweeting, because there's some people in my book who hadn't intended to be offensive, like they were trying to make a liberal joke, but it came out, inadvertently as offensive. And I remember somebody tweeting at the time, doesn't Jon Ronson realise that kind of attention doesn't matter?
Yeah.
But that sounds like a, excuse my language, frightening fucking world where somebody's attention isn't taken into account. So that's one thing. Cruelty, intentional cruelty, that's very different to the kind of stuff that I write about in my public shaming book. So I have no sympathy for, these men who are being toppled.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Because of sex abuse. And I have no sympathy for, neo-Nazis marching on Charlottesville. But I do have sympathy for the myriad miscarriages of justice that happen on Twitter. Twitter is the world's worst information swapping service. We are constantly ruining somebody, and then the next day it turns out that what they did wasn't what we thought they'd done. I mean, I was like, oh.